So let's talk about the Bantu people. And I want to talk about where does that name Bantu comes from. But before I talk about that, I need to mention that going by what I've talked about in my previous videos, I don't like calling people Bantu or Nilotes or Kushites or whatever other groups there are out there because it's not actually accurate because the classifications are not about the people, the genetics are more about the language. That's how those groups came up, or that's how these groups were formed. The people who put Africans in those groups were doing so through the languages they were using, the linguistics. So even when this is talked about is talked about in academic papers, is language groups, it's not the people. But anyways, over time, people have come to use these words to mean groups of people. And in this video, I'm going to do that, and it's for a reason. Let's say all people who speak Bantu language are Bantu. All people who speak Cushitic language are Cushites, and all people who speak Nilotic languages are Nilotes. And then you can add any other group, especially from the west of Africa. Yeah, especially the west of Africa, where I'm not very conversant about the local tribes. Anyways, now it's important to point out that not every African is Bantu. Not every black person from the sub-Saharan Africa is Bantu. In fact, it's about 30% of sub-Saharan Africans who are Bantu. The rest are Nilotes and Kushites, and then there are these other groups from West Africa. So it seems like there are people who have this understanding that Bantu means all black people. In fact, some of the people you might find with the highest amount of melanin are not Bantu in the sub-Saharan Africa. Now, with that said, yeah, I need to mention that the Bantus are mostly in Eastern Africa and Southern Africa and Central Africa for the most part. West Africa, very little amount of Bantus. There in Nigeria, it's less than 10% of people who can claim to be Bantu. It's like one small tribe, the South West, I think. And then in Ghana, non-existent. If you go to countries like Senegal, there are no Bantus. Mali, Mauritania, those countries in West Africa, there are no Bantus. Where you'll find more Bantus, it's toward the south in Cameroon. Then you'll start coming into contact with a lot more Bantu tribes. So yeah, let's get that out of the way. We are going to use the word strictly Bantu. Not every black person is a Bantu, at least from where I come from. I know there's a different use of the word, and I'm not going into that. Now, what is the origin of the word Bantu? The word Bantu has a very simple origin. And if you are going to claim that Bantus are from how far back in history, we need to acknowledge when this word started being used and for what reason, what made it become a popular word or a word to be used to describe a group of languages, because that's what it does. And then later on, of course, people have come to understand it to mean that it describes a group of people, which I disagree with if you've watched my previous videos. Now, Bantu, as I've said, has a very simple origin. When the linguists came to Africa, or when the Europeans came and then their linguists came to Africa and they were trying to study African languages, they were trying to find trends and similarities in the languages so that they can decide which languages belong in the same group. And one trend that stood out that made the Bantu languages be put together is not anything mysterious or anything let me say, it's not anything so complex. It's just that whenever they went into a tribe that used a Bantu language and they asked them, what do you call a person? They will say something like Mtu and Watu. That's Swahili. For Swahili, Mtu is one person, Watu is people. And then when you go to other Bantu languages like Kikuyu, they will say Mondo is as a person, and then Ado as people. And then you go to Kisses, they will say Omondo, Abanto. You go to Kamba, they will say Mundu, Ndo. You go to Zulu in South Africa, they will say Umundu, Abantu. You go to Botswana, in Botswana, they will say Modo, Banto, or Bato. So it was about the reason why these languages were put together is because whenever they ask these different tribes what they called a person, they will say we call a person something close to mtu or ado or vanto or monto, and then for the plural they will say something like vanto, avanto, watu. So then they decided, okay, these languages are going to be Bantu. Bantu is a word for people, but it's not a word for people because of the tribal or whatever. It's about, that is the word these people use to describe a person and people. So that's the origin of the Bantu. Anyways, of course, Bantu has come to have a different, it has come to have a different meaning. I understand, especially in the West, in the Black community, especially, it has come to mean something spiritual and something that has to do with a deep identity. But in Africa, that's the simple origin of the word Bantu or Abantu. It has nothing to do with some origin of tribal whatever. It's just that the word means people or a person. It's like in English, a person, people. That's all. So those are my random thoughts.